The weight of loss. In the cold expanse of space, where silence reigned supreme, a small fleet of ships drifted like forgotten dreams. Each vessel bore scars from battles fought against an enemy that had shown no mercy. The VOR refugees were remnants of a once thriving civilization, now reduced to mere shadows of their former selves. Among them was Aura, a young leader burdened with the weight of her people's fate. As she stared at the flickering readouts on her ship's control panel, despair gnawed at her heart. A journey through darkness. Months had passed since the ruthless Ampa obliterated their home world, leaving millions dead in their wake. With supplies dwindling and hope fading, Aura felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of her ship. The hulls of their vessels were battered. Cosmic radiation had corroded them further. Inside, survivors huddled together in dimly lit quarters, their eyes hollow from hunger and fear. Yet amidst this bleakness, they pressed on, a flicker of determination, ignited by sheer willpower. "We must survive," Aura whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. The thought echoed through her mind like a mantra as she navigated through uncharted depths of the galaxy. A beacon in the void. Just when all seemed lost, an unexpected signal pierced through the darkness. A long-range sensor detected an unknown planet teeming with life. It was lush and vibrant, a stark contrast to the desolation surrounding them. With their last reserves of fuel dwindling, Aura made a choice that would change everything. They would head towards this mysterious world. As they approached, a transmission crackled over the comms, an invitation from an unfamiliar voice that promised aid and shelter. It was not the cold commands of their enemies, but something warm and inviting. Suspicion warred with desperation in Aura's heart. Could they truly trust these strangers? In that moment, she realized there was no other option. Touching down on New Terra, the VOR landing ships touched down on a vast field that had once been a verdant valley, but was now transformed into a bustling spaceport filled with strange technology. Humans lined the perimeter, diverse faces radiating warmth and sympathy as they welcomed the weary refugees. As Aura stepped down from her ship, she marveled at this alien world that felt both enchanting and intimidating. Administrator Brian Boyd greeted them with an outstretched hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about goodwill among humans. "Welcome to New Terra," he said warmly. "We've prepared accommodations for you." Despite her exhaustion, Aura mustered a weak smile as she shook his hand. A world unlike any other. As they were led into temporary shelters, sprawling complexes surrounded by modern architecture, Aura couldn't help but gawk at everything around her. Soft beds replaced hard bunks. Glowing panels illuminated rooms with steady light. Tables overflowed with unfamiliar foods, crisp vegetables, and roasted meats that made her stomach churn with longing. Yet despite this comfort, many VOR remained wary. They huddled together in tight-knit groups, casting suspicious glances at human soldiers patrolling nearby. Aura sensed their tension. It was understandable given what they had endured at the hands of the Ampa. Building bridges. Days turned into weeks as Aura worked tirelessly to bridge gaps between her people and their human hosts. She spent long hours with Lieutenant Marcus Wright, learning about human customs and technology, marveling at tools that could communicate across vast distances or machines that soared through skies effortlessly. But unease lingered in her heart as whispers circulated among humans about resources being strained by refugee needs. Then there was Zora, a young VOR female who caught Sergeant Alex Thompson's eye. As they laughed together despite language barriers, Aura noticed disapproving glances from elders back home. A flicker of hope. Aura understood that integrating into human society would be fraught with challenges. They had lost everything: their home, identity, way of life. Yet as she looked out over children playing together, VOR and human alike, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her heart. But just as optimism began to bloom, sirens wailed across New Terra, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. Human soldiers raced to their posts while Administrator Boyd barked orders into his communicator. On the horizon loomed a dark shape growing larger by the second, the unmistakable silhouette of an AMPA warship. Confronting fear, panic gripped Ara's heart as dread settled in. This nightmare wasn't over, it was only just beginning. As Boyd's face hardened with determination, he turned to his communicator again. All military personnel report to your stations immediately. Initiate emergency protocol Sigma 9. The colony erupted into organized chaos. Civilians emerged from shelters with fear etched on their faces, while soldiers rushed past them in grim silence. They needed to get everyone to safety. But how? With every heartbeat echoing like thunder in her ears, Ara knew one thing for certain. They would have to fight back against their oppressors if they wanted any chance at survival arrival on New Terra. The VOR ships settled onto the surface of New Terra, a world that shimmered with life and possibility. As the last of the engines powered down, Ara stepped out onto the soft, green grass, her heart racing with a mix of hope and trepidation. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth, a stark contrast to the sterile confines of their ships. She could hardly believe they had made it. After months of despair, they were finally here. Surrounding her were other VOR refugees, their faces reflecting a myriad of emotions: relief, confusion, and lingering fear. Ara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was a new beginning for her people, but it was also fraught with uncertainty. Would the humans truly welcome them, or would they see them as intruders? The warm welcome. As they disembarked, a group of humans approached, their expressions warm and welcoming. Administrator Brian Boyd stood at the forefront, his outstretched hand signaling goodwill. "Welcome to New Terra," he said, his voice deep and reassuring. "We've prepared accommodations for you and your people. I know you've been through a great ordeal." Ara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her as she shook his hand. "Thank you," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "We are grateful for your hospitality." She glanced around at her fellow refugees. Some were smiling cautiously, while others remained skeptical. The humans led them through the settlement, a bustling spaceport filled with strange technology that seemed almost magical to Ara. Towering buildings of glass and steel glinted in the sunlight, while sleek vehicles glided effortlessly along smooth roads. This world was unlike anything she had ever seen, a stark contrast to the organic architecture of her lost home. Settling in. As they arrived at their temporary shelter, a sprawling complex surrounded by lush gardens, Ara couldn't help but marvel at the amenities that greeted them. Soft beds replaced the hard bunks of their ships. Glowing panels illuminated the rooms with a steady light. In the dining area, long tables overflowed with an array of foods that tantalized her senses, crisp vegetables and roasted meats that made her stomach rumble. Yet despite this comfort, many VOR remained wary. They huddled together in tight-knit groups, casting suspicious glances at the human soldiers patrolling nearby. Ara noticed the tension in their postures. They flinched at sudden noises or movements. It was understandable given what they had endured at the hands of the AMPA. Building trust. Days turned into weeks as Ara worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between her people and their human hosts. She spent long hours with Lieutenant Marcus Wright, learning about human customs and technology. He explained how their communication devices worked and showed her how to operate various machines that seemed like magic to her. But even as she immersed herself in these wonders, Ara couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her heart. She overheard whispers among some human colonists about how the refugees were straining their resources. The elders of her community exchanged worried glances as they discussed their future. Then there was Zora, a young VOR female who had caught the eye of Sergeant Alex Thompson. Ara watched as they spent more time together, laughing despite their language barriers. Yet she could sense disapproval from some older members of both communities. Tension simmered just beneath the surface, a flicker of hope. Despite these challenges, Ara felt a flicker of hope when she observed children playing together, VOR and human alike, sharing smiles and tentative gestures of friendship. Perhaps there was a chance for harmony after all. But just as optimism began to bloom in her heart, sirens wailed across New Terra, a sound that sent chills down her spine. Human soldiers rushed to their posts, while Administrator Boyd barked orders into his communicator. Aura's heart raced as she recognized that familiar dread creeping back into her life. The threat emerges. On the horizon loomed a dark shape growing larger by the second, the unmistakable silhouette of an AMPA warship. Panic gripped Aura's heart as dread settled in. This nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Administrator Boyd. She called out urgently. That's an AMPA warship. They found us. Boyd's face hardened as he turned to his communicator. This is Administrator Boyd. All military personnel report to your stations immediately. Initiate emergency protocol Sigma 9. The colony erupted into organized chaos. Civilians emerged from shelters with fear etched on their faces, while soldiers rushed past them in grim silence. We need to get everyone to safety, Boyd said urgently as he scanned the horizon. The bunkers should hold. Aura nodded, mind racing with thoughts about what would happen next. The AMPA wouldn't stop until they had wiped them out. They had weapons capable of vaporizing entire city blocks. We can't match them in firepower, Boyd said grimly, but we might be able to use the terrain to our advantage. Aura's mind whirred with possibilities as she considered their options. If we can draw them into the city proper, she suggested, we could set up ambush points. Boyd nodded appreciatively. I like the way you think. Let's make it happen. Rallying together. As they worked out details for defense strategies, Sergeant Alex Thompson approached with Zora at his side. The young VOR's eyes were wide with fear, but also determination, a commitment that hadn't been there before. Sir, Thompson said, saluting Boyd, we've got a group of VOR volunteers ready to assist in defense. Zara stepped forward confidently. We've run from the AMPA long enough. It's time we fought back. A series of explosions rocked the outskirts of the colony as the AMPA ship touched down nearby. Boyd's communicator crackled with reports of enemy troops disembarking. All right, Boyd said firmly. Thompson, take your team and the VOR volunteers to set up perimeter defenses. Buy us as much time as you can. As Thompson and Zara hurried off on their mission, Boyd activated the colony-wide communication system. Attention all citizens of New Terra. This is Administrator Boyd. We are under attack by hostile forces. Please proceed to your nearest emergency bunker immediately. This is not a drill. Aura watched anxiously as civilians were ushered into bunkers, the heavy doors sealing behind them with a resounding thud. In the distance, flashes of weapons fire erupted as Thompson's team engaged AMPA forces. Preparing for battle, Boyd emerged from his command center encased in sleek armored exoskeleton gear, an imposing figure ready for battle. He handed Aura a plasma rifle. Its weight felt unfamiliar yet comforting in her hands. Our defense systems will slow them down, he said through helmet speakers, but they won't hold forever. We need to take this fight to them. Aura nodded resolutely. She felt adrenaline coursing through her veins as they made their way toward front lines, where sounds of battle grew louder, the air crackling with energy discharges and acrid smells filling her nostrils. They passed pockets of resistance, human and VOR fighters working together seamlessly against advancing AMPA troops, an inspiring sight amidst chaos. Facing their foes, rounding a corner brought them face to face with a squadron of AMPA warriors whose alabaster skin gleamed menacingly under sunlight, cold eyes filled with malice behind energy shields. At their head stood Crew, the AMPA commander whose lips curled into a sneer upon recognizing Aura. So, the little VOR rat shows her face at last. Boyd raised his weapon defiantly, servos whirred within his exoskeleton suit. You've made a big mistake coming here. Crew laughed coldly, a sound like shards of ice piercing through tension-filled air. Mistake. No human. This is destiny. The eradication of VOR vermin. Energy crackled around them as both sides readied weapons, the calm before storm settling heavily over battlefield, filled with tension. Tensions rising. As the dust settled from the initial skirmishes, the atmosphere on New Terra shifted. What had begun as a hopeful refuge for the VOR was now a pressure cooker of anxiety and distrust. Aura felt the weight of her leadership pressing down on her shoulders. The VOR had been through so much already. They had lost their home, their families, and now they were caught in a conflict that threatened to consume them once more. In the days following the Ampa's arrival, Era noticed a growing divide between her people and the humans. While some humans were eager to help, others viewed the VOR with suspicion, seeing them as a burden rather than allies. The whispers grew louder, complaints about resources being stretched thin, concerns about integrating two very different cultures. Era's dilemma. Era spent sleepless nights grappling with these tensions. She wandered through the settlement, observing interactions between humans and VOR. Some children played together, their laughter echoing against the backdrop of conflict, but many adults remained wary. It was clear that trust would not come easily. One evening, while walking through the central courtyard, Aura overheard a heated conversation between two human soldiers. Why should we risk our lives for them? One soldier said, his voice dripping with disdain. They're just aliens who brought their problems here. Era's heart sank at his words. She understood their fears. After all, they had faced unimaginable horrors at the hands of the Ampa. But she also knew that unity was their only chance for survival. If they couldn't find common ground, they would all fall. Zara's friendship. Amidst this turmoil, Zara, the young VOR female who had formed a bond with Sergeant Alex Thompson, became a beacon of hope. Aura watched as Zara and Alex spent time together, bridging the gap between their cultures through laughter and shared experiences. Their friendship was a reminder that connection could flourish even in adversity. One afternoon, Aura approached Zora as she practiced combat drills with Alex. "You seem happy," Aura said, forcing a smile despite her worries. Zora beamed. "Alex is teaching me how to fight. I never thought I could learn so much." Her enthusiasm was infectious. "Just be careful," Aura cautioned gently. "Not everyone sees us as friends." Zora nodded but remained optimistic. "We can change that. If we show them we're not a threat, maybe they'll come to accept us." Era admired Zora's spirit, but felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Would it be enough? The gathering storm. As tensions simmered beneath the surface, reports came in about increased Ampa activity near New Terra's borders. Aura joined Administrator Boyd and Lieutenant Wright in an emergency meeting to discuss their strategy. "We need to prepare for an all-out assault," Boyd said grimly, his brow furrowed with concern. "The Ampa won't stop until they've eradicated us." Wright nodded in agreement. "We've fortified our defenses as best we can, but we need more manpower." He turned to Aura. "Can you rally your people? We need every able-bodied VOR to stand with us." Era felt a surge of determination rise within her. "I will do everything I can," she promised. As she left the meeting, she resolved to speak with her fellow VOR about joining the fight against their common enemy. They had run long enough. It was time to stand and defend their new home. Rallying the troops. That evening, under the soft glow of New Terra's twin moons, Era gathered her people in the central courtyard. The air buzzed with anticipation as refugees filled the space, faces marked by fear, but also flickering with hope. "Brothers and sisters," Aura began, her voice steady yet passionate, "we have faced unimaginable loss and hardship together. We are not just survivors. We are warriors. The Ampa threaten our existence once more, but this time we have allies, humans who are willing to fight beside us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as some exchanged doubtful glances, while others nodded in agreement. "We cannot allow fear to dictate our actions," Aura continued, raising her voice above the whispers. "If we stand united with our human friends, we have a chance to reclaim our future. Who will fight alongside me?" Slowly but surely, hands began to rise. First one or two, then dozens more until nearly every VOR stood with determination etched on their faces. "The training begins." With renewed resolve, Ara organized training sessions alongside human soldiers like Thompson and Wright. They taught the VOR how to use weapons effectively and navigate combat scenarios, skills they would need if they were to face the AMPA head-on. Zara excelled during training. Her agility allowed her to adapt quickly to human tactics while also incorporating her own unique fighting style. Ara watched proudly as Zara led a group of young VOR through drills, her enthusiasm infectious. However, not all were convinced about fighting alongside humans. Some elders voiced concerns about trusting those who were once strangers. Old wounds ran deep among her people. One evening after training, Ara found herself sitting alone on a bench overlooking the training grounds when Boyd approached her. "You're doing great work," he said softly as he sat beside her. "Thank you," Ara replied quietly, "but I worry about my people's trust in you all." Boyd sighed heavily. "It takes time to build trust after everything you've been through." He paused before continuing thoughtfully, "But actions speak louder than words." Facing doubts, days turned into weeks as preparations continued. Every moment counted as they braced for what lay ahead, an inevitable confrontation with their enemies. Yet doubts lingered in Ara's mind. Were they truly ready? Could they overcome centuries of prejudice and unite against a common foe? One night, while lying awake in her quarters, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Zara standing at her door, looking anxious yet determined. "Ara," she said breathlessly, "I heard something. I think they're planning an attack soon." A chill ran down Ara's spine at Zora's words. She quickly gathered herself and followed Zara outside where other VOR had gathered, an air of urgency surrounding them. "Everyone," Ara called out as she stepped into view of anxious faces illuminated by flickering lights from nearby structures. "We need to prepare for anything. Stay alert." The calm before the storm. As night fell over New Terra, a tense calm enveloped them. Soldiers patrolled diligently while civilians remained vigilant within their shelters awaiting news from leaders above ground. Hours passed slowly, each tick of time feeling heavier than before, until finally dawn broke, revealing an ominous sight on horizon. The looming silhouette of an AMPA warship descending toward them, like a dark omen signaling doom ahead. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Ara as she gathered everyone together once more. This time, there would be no turning back. "Today we fight," she declared passionately before leading them toward makeshift defenses set up around colony perimeter. A line drawn between hope and despair where lives hung precariously in balance, the calm before the storm. The tension in New Terra was palpable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement, Ara stood on a ridge overlooking the makeshift defenses. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew that the AMPA forces were coming, and soon. Ara could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she surveyed the preparations below. Soldiers, both human and VOR, worked tirelessly to fortify their positions, setting up barricades and laying traps. In the distance, she could see the dark silhouette of the AMPA warship hovering ominously in the sky. It was a constant reminder of their impending doom, a specter that loomed over them all. Ara clenched her fists, determination coursing through her veins. They had fought too hard to give up now. They had to stand united against this threat. Rallying together, Ara descended from the ridge and made her way toward the command center where Administrator Boyd and Lieutenant Wright were coordinating the defense strategy. As she entered, she found them surrounded by maps and holographic displays of the battlefield. "Glad you could join us," Boyd said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "We're finalizing our plan for when they arrive." "Good," Ara replied, her resolve hardening. "I've gathered every able-bodied VOR willing to fight. We're ready to stand with you." Wright nodded approvingly. "That's what we need, a united front. The AMPA won't know what hit them." He pointed to a section of the map highlighting key positions they needed to defend. "The strategy unfolds. Here's the plan," Boyd explained, outlining their strategy. "We'll set up ambush points along this route where we can funnel their forces. The VOR know these streets better than anyone. Your knowledge will be invaluable. Era felt a surge of pride at being recognized for her people's strengths. We'll use our agility and familiarity with the terrain to outmaneuver them, she said confidently. As they discussed tactics, Aura couldn't shake off a sense of foreboding that hung in the air like a storm cloud. She knew that even with their combined forces, facing the Ampa would be a daunting challenge. A moment of reflection. Later that evening, as night enveloped New Terra, Era found herself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the settlement. The stars twinkled above, a comforting sight amidst uncertainty. She thought about her people, their losses, their fears, and their hopes for a brighter future. Suddenly, Zara joined her on the balcony, her face illuminated by soft moonlight. "Ara," she said quietly, "do you think we can really win?" Ara turned to face her friend, seeing both fear and determination in Zora's eyes. "We have to believe we can," she replied firmly. "If we don't fight for our future, what will we have left?" Zara nodded slowly, absorbing Ara's words. "I just wish it didn't have to come to this." "I know," Ara said softly, "but sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what we love." The first assault. As dawn broke over New Terra, an eerie silence settled over the settlement, a silence that was soon shattered by alarms blaring throughout the colony. Ara's heart raced as she hurried back to the command center where Boyd and Wright were already preparing for battle. "Here they come," Wright shouted as he pointed toward the horizon, where dark shapes began to emerge. Ampa soldiers descending from their ship like locusts ready to consume everything in their path. "Positions," Boyd ordered as soldiers scrambled into place along barricades and behind makeshift cover. Ara felt adrenaline surge through her body as she took her place beside Zara and Alex Thompson at one of the ambush points. They exchanged determined glances. This was it, the moment they had prepared for. The clash begins. As the first wave of Ampa soldiers charged forward, Ara's instincts kicked in. She raised her weapon and fired into the fray alongside Alex and Zora. Plasma bolts lit up the battlefield as chaos erupted around them. "Keep them back," Alex shouted as he took down an Ampa soldier with precise shots from his rifle. Ara moved fluidly between cover points, using her agility to evade incoming fire while returning shots at advancing enemies. The air crackled with energy discharges. Explosions rocked the ground beneath them as both sides fought fiercely for control. But despite their best efforts, it became clear that the Ampa were relentless. More soldiers poured into view, overwhelming their defenses. Turning point. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Boyd's voice boomed through their communication systems. "Initiate Operation Hammer and Anvil. All units fall back to secondary positions." Era felt a surge of renewed energy as they executed their plan, drawing back into tighter formations while luring Ampa troops deeper into their trap. "Now," Boyd commanded as heavy artillery opened fire from concealed positions. Devastating blasts tore through enemy ranks. Amidst this chaos, Era saw an opportunity. She rallied her fellow VOR fighters for one final push against their foes. "Let's show them what we're made of," she cried out as they surged forward together, VOR and human fighting side by side against a common enemy. The tide turns. With each passing moment, it became evident that they were gaining ground against the Ampa forces. Teamwork forged through adversity began to pay off as they pushed back against overwhelming odds. Zara darted through enemy lines like a shadow. Her speed allowed her to take down multiple foes before they even realized what was happening. Ara watched in awe as Zara fought fiercely alongside Alex. Together they made an unstoppable team. But just when victory seemed within reach, Crew, the Ampa commander, emerged from amidst his troops like a dark storm cloud looming over them all. "No more games," he roared, charging toward Boyd with his energy blade drawn, a lethal glint reflecting in his cold eyes. Confrontation at dawn. Boyd stood firm despite Crew's advance. His exoskeleton hummed ominously as he prepared for battle. "You'll have to go through me first," he declared defiantly. As Crew raised his weapon threateningly toward Boyd's throat, Aura felt a rush of fear, but also fierce determination welling up inside her. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about standing up against tyranny and reclaiming their future. "Stop!" Aura shouted as she stepped forward boldly between them, her heart racing but resolve unshakable. "This isn't how it ends." Crew sneered at her defiance, but paused momentarily, the tension between them palpable as both sides held their breath waiting for what would happen next. A new hope. In that instant of uncertainty, something shifted within Aura. She realized that this battle was not just about fighting against oppression. It was also about forging new alliances and understanding one another despite differences. "We can find another way," she pleaded passionately, her voice cutting through chaos surrounding them like a beacon of hope amidst darkness. Boyd glanced at Aura with surprise, but quickly regained composure. He understood what she meant. Their fight could lead not only to victory, but also reconciliation if they dared take that leap together. Crew hesitated visibly, the weight of history pressing heavily upon him. But then something flickered in his cold gaze, a hint of curiosity mixed with rage at being challenged so openly by someone he deemed inferior. "Talk." He spat incredulously, but then paused again, considering options before him. The prospect of continued bloodshed weighed heavily on all involved parties. A moment of choice. In that critical moment when everything hung precariously in balance, a choice lay before them: continue down this path, filled with hatred, or take a leap into uncharted territory, where understanding might flourish instead. With hearts pounding fiercely within chests filled with uncertainty yet also courage, they stood united, ready for whatever came next.